Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a story so foundational, so, deeply embedded in our cultural consciousness, you might think you know it cold, Hamlet.
Mm-hmm.
But long before Shakespeare penned To Be or Not to Be, there was Amleth. And his tale. Well, it's a vastly different, much more brutal and utterly fascinating origin story that really challenges everything we thought we knew.
Indeed, it really does. While Shakespeare's masterpiece gave us this profound psychological tragedy, the original figure of Amleth, as chronicled way back in the 13th century Gesta Danorum by the Danish historian Saxo Grammaticus, well, he presents us with a hero of a markedly different mold.
Right.
The true enigma isn't really about the play itself, brilliant as it is, but about the very foundations of Saxo's character. Is Amleth, a verifiable historical figure, maybe a warrior king whose life inspired the legend?
Or just pure fiction.
Or purely a literary construct, born from these ancient tropes. Or maybe, and this is where it gets complex, is he something far more intricate, a mosaic of different influences woven together over centuries?
And that's our mission today. We've gathered a fantastic stack of sources to help us unpack this intriguing enigma. We're going to deconstruct Saxo's original, surprisingly brutal narrative.
It really is brutal.
Explore the major literary and folkloric parallels that seem to resonate across cultures, and then introduce you to a specific, pretty compelling historical candidate. Our journey will culminate in a synthesis of what scholars now call the amalgamation theory, which offers, well, a really comprehensive explanation for Amleth's mysterious origins.
It tries to bring all those threads together.
Exactly. So get ready, because you're about to gain a deeply informed and, I think, quite surprising perspective on one of literature's most enduring figures. Okay, so let's cast aside our images of, melancholy princes in black velvet for just a moment.
Yeah, leave Elsinore behind for a bit.
Right. And journey back to the early 13th century, to Denmark, and into the remarkable world of Saxo Grammaticus.
What's truly compelling about Saxo's Gesta Danorum, his deeds of the Danes, isn't just its content, but its very purpose. It was written in elegant Latin, a really ambitious project, this massive chronicle intended to document the origins of the Danes right from their mythical times.
So not just recent history, way back.
Way back. It actually shares a spirit with works like Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain.
Yeah.
Less objective historical record maybe, and more a foundational epic for a nation.
Okay.
Saxo wasn't merely recording facts as he saw them. He was actively shaping a national identity, crafting what historians sometimes call a usable past.
So we're definitely not talking about a dry historical chronicle here, but something much grander. A foundational epic for a nation, like you said, building an identity.
Precisely. His motivation was distinctly political and cultural. See, during the medieval period, it was quite common practice for European peoples to trace their lineage back to grand classical origins, the Greeks or the Trojans, for example. It gave them prestige.
Right, connecting to the glories of the past.
Exactly. But Saxo explicitly rejected this. He believed the Danes deserved a history that celebrated their prestige in their own right, reflecting their unique character and heritage. He wanted to look inward, to Danish roots, rather than to external, often more glorified, ancient civilizations.
That's quite a statement for the time.
It is, and it tells us that from its very inception, Amleth's story served a purpose far beyond mere entertainment. It was nation-building, a powerful tool for forging a collective identity. It really highlights how history and legend often intertwine, blurring the lines to create a compelling narrative for a people, one that reinforces their cultural values and sense of self.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? What narratives are we accepting today, maybe even as history, that are subtly designed to shape our collective identity, often without us even realizing it?
That's a very pertinent question. History is never just facts. It's always interpretation, always selection.
Okay, so that's the context. Let's dive into the actual narrative itself. For those of us who really only know Shakespeare's version, what happens in Saxo's account that later sparks such a powerful inspiration?
Right. The narrative opens with two brothers, Orvindil and Fengi. They're co-governors of Jutland, ruling under the Danish king, Rudolf. Orvindil, who is Amleth's father, is a renowned warrior, very successful ruler.
Okay.
Which unfortunately sparks this intense jealousy in his brother, Fengi.
Ah, the classic jealous brother trope.
Exactly. Driven by this envy, Fengi commits a pretty heinous act. He murders Orvindil, but the betrayal doesn't stop there. Crucially, and with chilling speed, Fengi then swiftly marries Orvindil's widow, Grutha, Amleth's mother, seizing power and sort of legitimizing his usurpation in the process.
Wow, swift is the word. No mourning period there.
Not really. This rapid, almost immediate remarriage is a key element that fuels the subsequent drama, and is of course something that resonates powerfully in Shakespeare's play, setting the stage for Hamlet's torment. It's a huge violation of the social order, a taboo broken not once, but twice fratricide, an incestuous marriage, essentially.
So young Amleth witnesses this horrific double betrayal. How on earth does he survive? He must have been in immediate peril, a direct threat to Vengi's new rule, surely.
He absolutely was. He's the rightful heir, potentially. Fearing for his own life, knowing he could easily be the next target, Amleth adopts a truly remarkable and pretty cunning survival tactic. He feigns utter madness.
Feigns madness, okay.
His reasoning is coldly calculated.
Huh.
A fool wouldn't be seen as a threat, right? And could therefore avoid what the sources call judicial violence, essentially, being executed as a potential rival to Fengzi's new, illegitimate power.
Makes sense, if you look harmless.
Exactly. And Saxo's descriptions of Amleth's feigned madness are vivid and quite visceral. He is portrayed as exhibiting an utter lack of wits, behaving in a listless and unclean manner.
Unclean? How so?
Well, with a discolored face and visage smudged with slime. He would apparently sit by the hearth, raking the embers, carving little wooden hooks, his appearance utterly disgusting and seemingly devoid of reason or threat.
That's vivid.
It is. This external, almost repulsive display of madness is central to his strategy. It makes him appear harmless, unhinged, and completely beneath Fengi's notice. Or so he hopes.
That's such a stark contrast to Shakespeare's more introspective Hamlet, who's debating the very nature of existence. Saxo's Amleth physically and visibly disgusts himself to appear harmless. What does that tell us about the world Saxo is depicting? It seems so raw.
It speaks volumes about the raw, brutal pragmatism of the era he's describing, or at least how he wants to portray it. Survival in Saxo's world often meant stripping away any semblance of dignity or intellectual prowess if it meant living to fight another day. Amleth's performance is not just a clever trick. It's a total immersion, a deliberate self-abasement designed to repel any would-be executioner. The court, seeing such a pathetic figure, would likely dismiss him as no danger. This deep level of disguise is about more than just appearing bad. It's about making himself utterly ignorable, completely non-threatening.
But Fengi isn't easily fooled, is he? He keeps trying to sniff out the truth, testing Amleth's supposed madness. He senses something's off.
That's right. Fengi, despite Amleth's pretty convincing performance, remains deeply suspicious. Maybe he senses that such a complete mental collapse was just too convenient, too sudden after his brother's death. So he orchestrates several tests to try and uncover the truth.
Like what?
Well, in one instance, a young woman, who we might sort of see as a proto-Ophelia, is sent to entice Amleth in a secluded place. The idea is to observe him, hoping to catch any flicker of sanity or, normal desire when he thinks he's alone with her.
Okay, a honey trap, basically.
Pretty much. However, Amleth is forewarned by a loyal confidant, a foster brother, some sources suggest, whose identity is a bit shadowy in Saxo, but who remains a crucial ally throughout.
So he has help.
He does. Amleth takes the girl to a private place, but she, in turn, is apparently captivated by his true nature, maybe sees through the facade, falls in love with him, and promises not to reveal his sanity.
That's a huge difference from Shakespeare. She becomes an ally.
She does. An ally, a co-conspirator in his elaborate deception, not a victim driven to despair or madness by his actions. It's a very different dynamic.
And then there's that truly infamous and frankly gruesome encounter with the courtier, the proto-Polonius, who tries to eavesdrop. This is where Amleth's ruthlessness really shines through, isn't it?
Yeah. It's perhaps the most shocking and defining moment of Saxo's narrative, yeah? It truly showcases the brutal pragmatism of this Amleth. So the most infamous test involves this courtier, the proto-Polonius, who hides under a pile of straw in Druth's chambers to eavesdrop on a conversation between Amleth and his mother, hoping to catch him dropping the act.
Right, listen in on them.
But Amleth, with his sharp mind always working, suspects something. He starts acting even more erratically, jumping on the straw, feeling something underneath, and discovers the spy.
Okay.
What happens next is graphically depicted. Amleth kills him, drags the body out, and then this is the really grim part. He slices the body into chunks, cooked it in boiling water, and threw the sorry limbs into the mouth of an open sewer for the pigs to eat.
Goodness gracious. He slices the body into chunks, cooks it, and then disposes of it in a sewer for pigs. That's a level of visceral brutality that just takes your breath away. It's not just murder, it's an act of utter annihilation of the body, designed to erase all traces.
It truly is, and it's essential to grasp just how different that world, or Saxo's portrayal of it, was. This isn't just murder. It's an extreme, almost ritualistic act of violence and desecration. It's designed not only to eliminate a threat, but to utterly erase the evidence, and perhaps even to send a terrifying silent message to anyone else who might be watching, including maybe his mother.
Right.
Only after this macabre disposal does Amleth finally drop his facade with his mother, Garutha, and reveal the truth of his father's murder, confronting her about her hasty marriage, presumably hoping to shock her into understanding, or maybe even complicity.
Wow. So that extreme act underscores the brutality of Saxo's world and Amleth's character. His actions aren't just about revenge, but about a complete, uncompromising reassertion of power in the most chilling way possible.
Absolutely. It's kill or be killed and leave no trace.
So Fengi, still distrustful, maybe even more scared now, eventually tries to get rid of Amleth for good. He sends him off to England with a death warrant. Sounds like a desperate final gambit.
It really was. After these disturbing events, Fengi, still maybe unable to definitively prove Amleth's sanity, but acutely aware of the potential danger he posed, especially after the spy incident, decides on a more permanent solution. He sends Amleth to England with 2 retainers, ostensibly as an envoy to the English king.
Right.
But secretly, they bear a wooden tablet or maybe runes carved on wood. The text isn't totally specific that explicitly requests Amleth's execution upon arrival.
A classic move. Send him away to be killed.
But Amleth, ever cunning and always one step ahead, outwits them yet again. While his escorts sleep on the ship, he finds the tablets, scrapes off the original message, and alters the inscription.
What does he change it to?
He changes it to call for the retainers' deaths instead. And remarkably, he adds a request for his own marriage to the English princess.
No way. That's audacious.
Incredibly audacious. And it works. He arrives in England, the retainers are executed, he marries the princess, and then spends about a year there, apparently impressing the English king and accumulating significant wealth before deciding to return to Denmark.
And his timing is impeccable.
Perfect timing. His arrival back in Jutland coincides with what he discovers is his own funeral feast, a macabre celebration of his supposed demise, arranged by Fengi. Naturally, Fengi and his courtiers are deep in their cups, drunk and completely unsuspecting.
The perfect moment for revenge.
Yeah.
And that's when he finally takes it. It sounds like the ultimate act of theatrical vengeance.
Precisely. Disguised once again, perhaps playing the fool or just blending in, Amleth joins the feast, maybe even encourages the drinking. Then he orchestrates a truly devastating, fiery vengeance. He gets the courtiers even more drunk, perhaps tangles them up in tapestries or nets,
Oh, wow.
and then sets fire to the hall, trapping and burning all the unsuspecting courtiers and his uncle Fengi to death inside.
A fiery end for them all.
A very fiery end. And unlike Shakespeare's tragic finale, where Hamlet dies alongside his enemies in a duel and poisoning plot, Saxo's story continues. Amleth emerges triumphant. He gives a speech to the surviving nobles, justifies his actions, and is promptly crowned king of Jutland.
So he actually wins. He gets the kingdom.
He gets the kingdom, his wealth, his vengeance. He even goes on to have further adventures, takes a second wife in Scotland, fights more battles, and eventually dies heroically in a later battle, unrelated to Fengi.
So unequivocally a tale of successful revenge and reestablished order, not tragic downfall. It's a heroic arc, fundamentally different in tone and outcome from what many of us know from Hamlet.
Fundamentally different, and this triumphant ending aligns perfectly with Saxo's overall intentions, remember. His chronicle is filled with vivid descriptions of military campaigns, blood feuds, the warrior's code of honor and revenge, all reflecting the kind of heroic, perhaps idealized Viking Age culture he sought to document for Denmark.
Right.
This isn't just a random plot device, it's a reflection of the societal values, or at least the values Saxo wanted to project. Strength, cunning, loyalty, and retribution as heroic virtues.
So in that context, Amleth's violence isn't presented as a moral failing then, but actually as a heroic act, restoring balance.
Precisely. Our sources analyzing Saxo indicate this emphasis on militarism and what we might maybe loosely call pagan values aligns remarkably well with modern archaeological and historical research on Viking societies. Amleth's violent revenge is presented not as a crime or a moral transgression within that framework, but as a necessary heroic act. It restores what one scholar called the mutilation of the former temporal and social order.
Mutilation. That's a strong word.
It reflects the severity of the initial crime. His father's murder and his mother's untimely remarriage represented a profound disruption to the kinship structure, to the political order. Amleth's actions, however brutal, are seen as justly reestablishing the proper order in a world where justice often required forceful, even extreme, action. It's about restoring honor and balance.
What's truly fascinating here, though, is how Amleth's story, despite Saxo framing it as specific Danish history, resonates with narratives found across so many different cultures. It points to something deeper, doesn't it? An almost universal pattern that transcends time and geography.
It absolutely does. The themes and the character type within Amleth's narrative seem to tap into something fundamental about human experience and storytelling itself. It's like discovering a blueprint for a certain kind of hero, a certain kind of plot that gets reiterated throughout history in different forms.
Let's talk about this wise fool concept then,
Yeah.
because Amleth absolutely embodies it. It's more than just a clever trick, isn't it? It feels like a whole social phenomenon almost.
Oh, it's far more profound than a simple ruse. It's a classic literary paradox, a powerful archetype. The wise fool is a character perceived by others as a simpleton, a buffoon, maybe even genuinely mad, who in fact possesses deep wisdom, cunning, or critical insight, often masked for strategic purposes.
Right.
This archetype appears in cultures from antiquity right up to the present. Think of figures ranging from court jesters in medieval Europe to certain trickster deities in mythology, or even some characters in modern literature.
So what's the advantage? Why pretend to be a fool?
Well, the genius of it, especially in a hierarchical society like a royal court, is that a fool is not expected to grasp social conventions. They operate outside the normal rules of decorum. And therefore, the fool enjoys relative freedom, particularly in his or her freedom of speech.
They can say things others can't.
Exactly. In a courtly setting, this perceived lack of wits grants a fool a unique kind of immunity. They can speak unpleasant truths to the powerful, they can mock, they can criticize, without facing the severe punishment a supposedly sane courtier might face for such bluntness or disrespect.
I see.
Saxo's Amleth demonstrates this masterfully. He uses words that are described as truthful but appearing mad and nonsensical. His pronouncements can be interpreted either as a wise man's insights or as a madman's gibberish. This ambiguity protects him while allowing him to subtly mock his enemies, maybe drop hints, and manipulate situations, all under the guise of harmless idiocy.
So it's not just a disguise for safety. It's an entire persona with a built-in social license, almost like a superpower in a dangerous court environment. But you also hinted earlier that there might be a deeper, more complex psychological dimension to Amleth's madness, not just a purely strategic one, something more internal.
You've hit on something essential there, and it's where the character gets really interesting, even in Saxo. While the feigned madness is undoubtedly strategic, some readings of the text, some scholarly interpretations, suggest it's not purely a performance. Amleth is described in some analyses as a queer masochistic subject.
Masochistic.
Yes, in the sense that he seems to prolong his revenge, prolong his own suffering and degradation, suggesting an internal state beyond mere cunning calculation. The character is said to be fastened to a dark vision of ongoing pain, a torment he not only endures, but to which he seems, in some strange way, to willingly submit. This paradox extends beyond a simple survival tactic. It hints at the kind of introspective complexity that Shakespeare would later explore, much more explicitly, of course. But even here, there's a sense that Amleth finds a kind of grim, almost perverse pleasure in his invited misery, a strange, self-imposed suffering that maybe fuels his ultimate vengeance. It's as if the mask of madness begins to meld with something genuinely unsettling within him, a darkness he cultivates.
Wow, that completely reframes our understanding, doesn't it? Yeah. To find this deep internal struggle, this invited misery, embedded even in Saxo's brutal tales, suggests that the complexities of the human psyche, that push and pull of duty versus torment, were already deeply resonant themes long before Shakespeare gave them such famous philosophical voice.
It truly does.
It really blurs the line between a purely strategic disguise and a profound self-imposed ordeal.
It suggests that even in Saxo's seemingly straightforward, action-packed, brutal narrative, there was perhaps a kernel of that internal struggle, a mind tormented by more than just external threats. It elevates the character beyond a simple avenging hero and helps at the enduring fascination we have with the internal landscape of a tormented mind. It's a powerful reminder that the human condition, with all its psychological intricacies, has always been fertile ground for storytelling.
So this character, the wise fool avenger, isn't unique to Denmark then?
Not at all. The story of Amleth is filled with elements: the feigned madness, the uncle betrayal, the clever revenge that appear in heroic narratives across different cultures. This strongly suggests its literary rather than purely historical origins, or at least that it drew heavily from existing widespread narrative patterns. These are echoes of ancient storytelling traditions.
Okay, give us some examples. What other heroes share Amleth's narrative DNA, showing us that this kind of story has really deep roots?
Well, the most compelling and probably the best documented parallel is the Roman legend of Lucius Junius Brutus.
Brutus, like the one associated with Caesar.
No, an earlier Brutus. This one is considered one of the founders of the Roman Republic. His story is chronicled by Roman historians like Livy, and the parallels are striking. Brutus's father and brother are killed by his uncle, Tarquinius Superbus, the tyrannical king of Rome who usurps power.
Okay. Uncle kills relatives, takes power. Sounds familiar.
Exactly. To save his own life, Brutus feigns idiocy. He's often depicted drooling, clumsy, speaking nonsense, utterly useless. He's even given the nickname Brutus, which in Latin literally means dullard or stupid.
Just like Amleth likely means fool.
Precisely. The name itself reflects the strategy. Both stories share a strikingly similar plot trajectory: family betrayal by an uncle, feigned insanity or stupidity for survival, biding time, and then a final, dramatic overthrow of the tyrant.
That's uncanny. Is there a connection?
There could well be a direct one. We know that Saxo's patron, Archbishop Absalon, was a learned man, and his library would likely have had access to classical texts, including those containing the Brutus legend, like Livy. So this provides a plausible direct connection and strongly supports the theory that Saxo might have consciously borrowed or adapted elements from these classical sources to enrich his Danish history. Give it a Roman precedent, perhaps.
So there's a direct classical link possibly influencing Saxo, and there's a medieval connection too, right?
Yeah.
Showing how these stories adapted and circulated over time.
Yes, absolutely. A later parallel, but still very relevant, exists in the Middle English romance, Havelock the Dane. This dates to the late 13th, early 14th century, so after Saxo, but it shows the persistence of the theme.
Havelock the Dane.
Okay. It tells the story of an exiled Danish prince, Havelock, whose kingdom is usurped. He must disguise his royal lineage to survive. Eventually, he returns to reclaim his throne. Like Amleth, Havelock is a hero connected to Denmark and Jutland who has to hide his true status. He doesn't necessarily fake madness in the same way, but he deliberately hides his royal identity by working as a lowly kitchen knave, performing menial tasks, enduring hardship and mockery.
So the core idea is the same. The noble hero brought low, using disguise and cunning to survive before triumphantly returning.
Exactly. This shared narrative pattern, the orphaned or exiled prince, the need for cunning and disguise, the ultimate reclamation of a lost kingdom, is a testament to the enduring nature of this heroic archetype. It shows how these tales circulate and evolve, adapting to different cultural contexts, maybe picking up local details, but retaining their core emotional power.
And when we start to place these narratives side by side, the similarities are so striking they almost form a clear pattern, revealing this shared narrative DNA across disparate cultures. It really is like seeing the same fundamental story archetypes appearing in different costumes down the centuries.
It really is.
Yeah.
Let's maybe break down those core elements quickly, just to see it clearly.
Good idea.
First, you've got the family betrayal. In Amleth's story, Uncle Fengi murders Father Orvandil and marries Mother Gerutha.
Right.
For Lucius Junius Brutus, Uncle Tarquinius kills his father and brother, seizing the kingship of Rome. And in Havelock the Dane, a wicked guardian kills Havelock's sisters and imprisons the young prince, effectively betraying his trust.
Okay, betrayal is central, then survival.
Right, method of survival. Amleth feigns that utter lack of wits, the uncleanliness, the madness.
Yep.
Brutus feigns idiocy, acting like a mute simpleton to deflect his uncle's suspicion.
Got it.
Havelock hides his royal identity by becoming a humble kitchen knave, pretending to be of low birth.
So disguise or deception is key. What about their journey?
Then there's the journey or exile. Amleth is sent to England for execution, but cleverly outwits his escorts and turns the tables.
The altered message, right.
Brutus, having accepted the dullard title, is taken along on a trip to the oracle at Delphi by Tarquinius' sons, where he subtly reveals his true destiny.
Okay.
Havelock escapes his evil guardian and flees to England with a kindly fisherman named Grim, who raises him.
Exile and a journey. And finally, the ending.
The resolution. Amleth achieves his triumphant, fiery revenge, incinerates his enemies, and becomes king of Jutland.
The successful hero.
Brutus orchestrates the overthrow of the tyrant Tarquinius after the rape of Lucretia and helps found the Roman Republic, becoming one of its first consuls. A different kind of triumph, but still overthrowing the tyrant.
A foundational moment.
And Havelock eventually proves his royal birth, reclaims his rightful kingdoms of Denmark and England, and generously rewards his loyal friends like Grimm.
So, justice is served, order restored.
In all cases, what this mosaic of stories really shows you is how deeply human these narratives are. The themes of injustice, betrayal, cunning, the underdog fighting for what's rightfully theirs, and the eventual restoration of order. These are timeless. They reappear across cultures and centuries in slightly different costumes, but they always resonate with our shared experiences, speaking to our universal desire for justice and the triumph of the worthy, however they achieve it.
Absolutely. The enduring appeal lies in these universal struggles, and the cleverness, the patience, the sheer resolve these heroes employ to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. These aren't just old tales, they're reflections of perennial human hopes and fears. Okay, so we've seen how Amleth fits beautifully into this fascinating pattern of literary archetypes, the wise fool avenger. But what if there was more to it? What if there was a real person, a specific king, whose tumultuous life provided the actual, factual scaffolding for this enduring legend? What if Amleth was, in some identifiable sense, a historical figure?
This is where this historical candidate comes into play, adding another fascinating, possibly tangible layer to the Amleth mythos. The theory that Amleth is anchored, at least partly, in a historical figure centers primarily on one individual, Amleth Quran.
Amleth Quran. Okay, tell us about him.
He was a prominent 10th century Norse Gaelic king, so Viking heritage, but deeply involved in the complex politics of Ireland and Britain. He ruled over significant territories, most notably holding the kingship of Dublin and also, at times, Northumbria in northern England.
And the name itself, Amleth. Amleth.
Oh.
It sounds incredibly similar, doesn't it? That phonetic connection is quite striking.
It absolutely is. The phonetic similarity is incredibly striking, and it's considered a crucial piece of the puzzle, like a linguistic breadcrumb leading us back through time. The name Amleth is essentially a Gaelic adaptation of the Old Norse name Olafr.
Olaf, like Saint Olaf.
Related, yes, it's a common Norse name. A variant of Olaf is Olaf, and both Amleth and Olafr are indeed considered etymologically linked to Amleth. It's not a perfect one-to-one match, but the connection is widely accepted by philologists. This linguistic link provides a tangible thread from a real historical figure to the legendary character.
Okay. And who was this Amleth Quran? What was his life like?
Well, Amleth Quran himself was a scion of the formidable Uí Ímair dynasty. You could think of them as arguably the most dominant Viking ruling family operating across the Irish Sea region during that period. Their power stretched from the bustling port of Dublin, a major Viking hub, right across to the ancient Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Northumbria, centered on York.
So, a powerful family.
Very powerful, but also constantly in battle. To be born into that family meant being born into a whirlwind of power struggles, alliances, betrayals, and ambitious conquests. They were constantly vying for control of key trading routes, strategic territories, fighting both other Viking groups and the native Irish and Anglo-Saxon rulers.
So his was a life defined by constant upheaval, maybe brutal power struggles, and a fight for survival, perhaps mirroring Amleth's predicament in some ways.
Precisely. His reign, which spanned some 40 turbulent years in the mid to late 10th century, was literally defined by a series of conquests, expulsions, and returns. He ruled Northumbria twice, being kicked out and coming back. He ruled Dublin at least twice, again facing challenges and regaining control. His life was a constant cycle of losing and regaining his grip on power.
Any specific examples?
Well, for instance, after his father Sitriach Cake died, Amleth seems to have fled to Ireland, possibly to avoid the growing power of the English King Aethelstan, who was expanding his control northwards. Meanwhile, Amleth's uncle, Gofraid, tried and failed to regain control of York from Aethelstan. So you see that pattern of exile, struggle, family members vying for the same territory.
Okay, I see the parallels. What else do we know about him?
Our sources, things like the Irish Annals and Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, describe him as a renowned warrior. Certainly a charismatic leader to command loyalty in that environment, but also notably sometimes as a ruthless pillager of churches, which paints a vivid picture of a man operating within the harsh, often brutal realities of 10th century power dynamics. Christianity was spreading, but old ways died hard, and monasteries were often wealthy, soft targets.
Right, a complex figure. How did his life end?
Interestingly, after a long life of almost constant warfare, his career effectively ended with a major defeat at the Battle of Tara in 980 against the Irish High King. After that crushing loss, he seems to have abdicated or been forced out, and he retired to the famous monastery on Iona, off the coast of Scotland.
Retired to a monastery. After being a church pillager.
It might seem ironic, but it wasn't uncommon for aging warriors, even Vikings, to seek refuge or penance in monasteries in their later years. He died there shortly after arriving. So this gives you a sense of a truly formidable and incredibly turbulent historical figure whose life certainly had the dramatic twists and turns: exile, loss of power, return, betrayal, battles that are absolutely ripe for becoming legend.
Absolutely. But is there a more specific link? Something beyond the general turbulence in the name. This is where it gets really interesting, right? Connecting a specific historical event from Anlaf's life to the very core of the Amleth story. Tell us about the Battle of Brunanburh.
Yes, this is, without a doubt, the most compelling narrative link often cited between Anlaf Corin and the Amleth legend. It comes from William of Malmesbury, who was a respected 12th century Anglo-Norman chronicler, significantly, writing before Saxo Grammaticus put the Amleth story down in the Gesta Danorum.
Okay, so William's account predates Saxo's Amleth. What does he say?
William recounts that prior to the hugely important Battle of Brunanburh in 937, a massive clash, where King Ethelstan of England defeated a combined army of Scots, Strathclyde Britons, and Vikings led by Anlaf Cuaran and his allies, Anlaf wanted to spy on the English camp.
Okay, reconnaissance. How did he do it?
According to William, Anlaf disguised himself as a skald, or a minstrel, a harpist.
A skald? And a skald in that era was far more than just a campfire storyteller, wasn't it? It was a position of real cultural and informational significance.
Absolutely, much more. In 10th century Scandinavian and Norse Gaelic society, skalds were highly esteemed figures. They were court poets, certainly, composing complex verses, but they were also historians, genealogists, commentators. Their elaborate poetry wasn't just entertainment. It was a living archive instrumental in shaping the heroic narratives and cultural memory of kings, battles, and dynasties.
So they were influential.
Immensely. They were often educated, articulate, and crucially, they could often move relatively freely between different courts and war camps, observing, gathering news, and recounting events. So for a king like Anlaf to assume that guise, to pretend to be a wandering poet or musician, it wasn't just a simple disguise like putting on a different cloak. It was tapping into a highly respected, yet perhaps often overlooked, position of potential influence and critically information gathering.
And how does this link to Amleth?
This specific reported act, this single act of deception, Anlaf feigning a different, seemingly harmless identity, a poet, not a king, to gain advantage and gather intelligence on his enemies, mirrors the absolute central plot device of the Amleth legend. The hero feigning madness, a different kind of harmless identity, to survive, observe, and gain insight into his enemies.
Wow. That's not just a passing resemblance. It's a direct parallel of a powerful figure using cunning and disguise, pretending to be something he's not, to outwit his adversaries.
Exactly. Anlaf's life, already marked by exile and triumphant return, punctuated by this specific recorded moment of cunning disguise. Well, it provides the perfect historical scaffolding upon which a heroic narrative, like Amleth's, could plausibly be built, or onto which existing folktale motifs could be attached.
So the king himself was known to be a patron of poets, the skalds, and then his own cunning act of pretending to be one becomes fodder for their stories. That's a beautiful, almost poetic, full circle. It suggests the legend might have literally sprung from the very tradition he supported.
It truly does seem plausible, doesn't it? The historical Anlaf was a patron of both Irish poets, Philid, and Scandinavian skalds, who composed verses praising him and celebrating his exploits. We still have fragments of poems about him. It is entirely plausible, maybe even likely, that a historical figure's life, especially one as tumultuous and dramatic as Anlaf's, would be absorbed and reshaped by the very oral tradition he patronized. That act of disguise as a poet is so memorable, so evocative, that it could have easily become a central motif in the folklore surrounding his exploits, passed down orally, perhaps embellished over time, eventually morphing into the feigned madness attributed to Amleth by Saxo generations later. It suggests that the very mechanism of the legend's creation, the skaldic oral tradition, is intrinsically linked to the central plot point of the legend itself, the hero feigning a different identity. It's a marvelous convergence of history and storytelling, showing how real-life events can be transformed into powerful, enduring myths.
Okay, this is fascinating. So we have these deep literary archetypes stretching back to Roman antiquity, like Brutus, and then we have this compelling, turbulent historical figure, Amleth, whose life and specific actions, like the skull disguise, perfectly parallel key elements of the legend. How do scholars reconcile these distinct pieces? This brings us to the most widely accepted theory today, right? The amalgamation hypothesis.
Precisely. The scholarly debate surrounding Amaleth's origins has been complex, mainly because, and this is a key point, there's no conclusive evidence of a native Scandinavian literary tradition for the Amleth figure that clearly predates Saxo's writing in the early 13th century.
So no old Viking saga of Amleth that Saxo just copied.
Not that we've found. There are later Icelandic versions, but they seem to derive from Saxo, not the other way around. This absence of a direct, provably pre-existing source within purely Scandinavian folklore has led most scholars to conclude that Amleth is probably not a wholly indigenous Danish hero, born purely from their own ancient sagas. Instead, he's likely a composite character.
A construct?
A construct, exactly. A powerful literary fusion built from various sources.
So it's truly like a literary stew, then, where different ingredients from different traditions, Roman history, maybe Celtic lore, actual Viking Age events, come together to make something completely new and incredibly rich.
That's an excellent analogy, yes. This amalgamation hypothesis, as it's generally known, proposes that the historical life of a figure like Amleth provided a crucial factual basis, a real-world anchor of battles, exiles, returns, maybe even that spy incident. This historical core was then interwoven with pre-existing folkloric and legendary archetypes like the wise fool avenger, drawing from tales and traditions found outside Scandinavia, such as the Brutus story from Rome, and maybe others too.
And this theory explains, well, everything we've talked about.
It's currently seen as the most plausible and comprehensive explanation, yes. It neatly accounts for both the lack of a singular, identifiable Scandinavian source before Saxo, and also for those remarkable parallels we find across disparate cultures and narrative traditions, the Roman, the English, maybe others. It shows the dynamic, often migratory nature of storytelling, how themes and characters can cross cultural boundaries and merge.
And even the name Amleth itself tells this multi-layered story, doesn't it? You mentioned it before. It seems like it has more than one possible origin, like a linguistic fossil revealing different strata of influence.
Absolutely. The name itself is another crucial piece of evidence, providing linguistic clues that powerfully reinforce this amalgamation theory. It's fascinating because there isn't just one simple, accepted etymology for Amleth, but several plausible layers, each potentially revealing a different facet of his character and origins.
Okay, let's unpack those layers. What's the most common explanation for the name?
Right. The most common and, for a long time, the standard accepted etymology is that the name Amleth, as Saxo Latinized it, comes from the Old Icelandic or Old Norse word amloidi.
Amloidi.
And that means...
It means fool, simpleton, sometimes translated as the annoying mad one or dullard.
Okay, that fits perfectly. It fits absolutely perfectly with the character's primary strategy, his feigned madness, and his courtly role as the wise fool. It's a purely functional name, in this view, directly tied to the central plot device and his survival strategy within Saxo's narrative. It quite literally describes his chosen guise. Makes perfect sense.
Case closed. Or is there more?
Well, there's more. There's a fascinating alternative etymology proposed relatively recently by Dr. Lisa Collinson, which delves into deep Celtic connections and potentially offers a psychological depth we might otherwise miss.
Celtic. How does that fit in?
She suggests that the Old Norse Amlodi might not be purely Norse in origin, but could itself be a Norse corruption or adaptation of an Old Irish name, Admalithi.
Admalithi, where does that come from?
This name is found, albeit belonging to a very minor character, in a famous ancient Irish saga called Tugail Brúne the Durga, the destruction of the Durga's hostel. But the meaning of Admalithi is highly significant. The name Admalithi seems related to a Gaelic word for grinding, or milling, and it was likely used, perhaps metaphorically by sailors, to describe a dangerous sea feature, such as a whirlpool or a maelstrom, like the Corrie Vrecken whirlpool, perhaps.
A whirlpool? How does that connect to Amleth?
Well, think about the world Lough lived in, the Norse Gaelic world of the Irish Sea, constant travel between Ireland, Britain, Scandinavia, sailors, poets, warriors moving back and forth. This linguistic connection suggests the name Amleth, associated with this powerful, dangerous natural force, could have been transmitted by sailors, incorporated into Scandinavian oral tradition, maybe losing its precise original meaning, but retaining a sense of doom or power, and eventually becoming Amleth, which then got interpreted as fool.
That's quite a journey for a name. But what does whirlpool add to our understanding of Amleth himself?
Symbolically, it's incredibly powerful. A maelstrom is a vortex, right? A vortex of gathering destructive forces, pulling everything inwards with an almost inescapable energy. This metaphor could perfectly describe Amleth's internal psychological state and his external circumstances. His life becomes this spiral of gathering doom, revenge, and violence. A whirlpool incarnate, as Collinson puts it.
Wow, whirlpool incarnate, that's an incredibly powerful image. It makes him much more than just a clever avenger. It makes me wonder if, for Amleth, the feigned madness wasn't just a cloak, but maybe a description of his inner world, a mind constantly swirling with vengeance, grief, and the need for self-preservation.
That's a brilliant observation, and it truly enriches our understanding, doesn't it? The etymology of whirlpool or saltwater vortex provides this potent symbolic lens. His life is a spiral of gathering doom, a whirlpool incarnate, a man caught in this torrent of revenge and suffering. Like King Conaire Mór in the Irish tale where the name Amleth appears, the character becomes surrounded by this theme of gathering doom as he is forced by circumstance or fate to break one taboo after another, spiraling deeper into a destiny that seems both chosen and inescapable.
So this interpretation transforms Amleth from just a simple plot device, the clever fool, into a truly complex character consumed by forces perhaps beyond his control. A man who is both cunningly sane on one level and profoundly psychologically fragmented by his ordeal on another.
Exactly. It's a testament to the layers of meaning that can be embedded in language and a name potentially carried across cultures. It adds that psychological depth that resonates so strongly later in Shakespeare.
Okay, so we have the functional fool, meaning Amleth, and this deeper symbolic whirlpool, meaning Amleth. Is there a third layer related to the historical figure?
Yes, indeed. We loop back to our 10th century king with the historical etymology. This is the name Olafur, the Old Norse name meaning descendant of an ancestor or ancestor's heir.
Olafur.
Which is undeniably linked phonetically and historically to Amleth. This layer ties the character directly to the life, lineage, and dynastic struggles of a real-world figure. It provides that dynastic context, the narrative of revenge. He's not just avenging a father, he's potentially reclaiming an ancestral right. It grounds the legend in a verifiable lineage and provides that historical anchor for the amalgamation theory.
So when we synthesize all these possible etymologies, the name Amleth itself becomes a rich tapestry.
It really does.
We have the functional fool, Amleth, directly describing his central plot device. We have the poetic and symbolic whirlpool Amleth, hinting at his deeper psychological torment and the consuming forces around him. And we have the historical Olafur connecting him to a real dynasty and a real historical figure.
Exactly. It highlights how profoundly rich and multi-layered the character of Amleth truly is, likely forged from these different linguistic currents, just as much as from historical events and literary tropes. It's a fantastic example of how complex the origins of even seemingly straightforward names and stories can be, revealing deep layers of cultural exchange and centuries of storytelling evolution.
Okay, so what does this all mean for our understanding of Hamlet's ancestor, and maybe for storytelling itself? After diving into Saxo's brutal tale, tracing the wise fool archetype across cultures from Rome to medieval England, uncovering the turbulent life of the fierce Norse Gaelic king Olafur, and even exploring the swirling etymology of Amleth's name, where do we finally land on this fascinating origin story? What's the takeaway?
Well, if we connect all these diverse threads back to the bigger picture, it becomes pretty clear, I think, that Amleth is not a singular historical figure in the way we might typically define one, like, say, Julius Caesar, where we have contemporary accounts. Rather, he emerges as a masterful literary construct.
A mosaic.
A living, breathing mosaic, exactly, composed of different influences. It seems likely that in his quest to provide a prestigious native history for the Danes, Saxo Grammaticus ingeniously fused heroic tropes possibly borrowed from Roman antiquity, as we saw with the Lucius Junius Brutus, parallel with the compelling, tumultuous life of a real, identifiable 10th century Viking monarch on Olafur.
Right.
And fascinatingly, this This potent lens was possibly enriched, maybe even shaped at a deeper level, by even older linguistic and folkloric elements potentially derived from Celtic culture, as so powerfully suggested by that Amlethy whirlpool name from the ancient Irish tale.
So the amalgamation theory really does hold up as the most comprehensive explanation. It manages to account for all these disparate pieces, the literary parallels, the historical figure, the linguistic clues, giving us a much richer, more nuanced understanding than if we tried to pin Amleth down as purely one thing, pure history or pure fiction. It explains why the story feels so universal, yet also so distinctly rooted in that Viking Age milieu.
Absolutely. It makes the most sense of all the evidence we have. The historical Amleth Quarren likely served as an invaluable factual anchor, a nucleus for the legend. His turbulent life of exile, his remarkable ability to repeatedly reclaim power, and especially that incredibly specific historical account of him disguising himself as a skald to spy on a rival camp, these provided the robust scaffolding, the believable core, upon which Saxo and perhaps centuries of prior oral tradition could build the fully formed legend we find in the Gesta Danorum.
Without that historical kernel, that spark of a real figure's dramatic life, the story might not have had the same weight, maybe, or perhaps even the initial impetus to capture the imagination so powerfully.
That's quite possible. Having a real named figure, even one whose life story gets heavily adapted, often gives a legend more traction, more perceived authenticity.
And that's the enduring power of the Amleth narrative itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Its hybrid nature, it's constantly drawing from and potentially influencing different traditions, making it somehow more resilient and resonant over time.
Indeed. It demonstrates a characteristic and deeply fascinating feature of medieval heroic literature, and perhaps storytelling more broadly. The lives of real historical figures are often adapted, embellished, mythologized, reshaped to serve a narrative or didactic purpose, to teach moral, to glorify a dynasty, to explain the present. Amleth Quarren's dramatic historical trajectory of loss and reclamation was seemingly reframed through the heroic lens of an avenging prince, drawing on ancient archetypes like the wise fool to create a story that would resonate for centuries to come, travel across languages, and eventually inspire one of the greatest plays ever written in English.
So ultimately, Amleth isn't just one thing, neither fully historical nor fully fictional, but this dynamic, evolving composite. A character who has continued to capture the human imagination, transforming from the brutal, honor-driven hero of the Viking sagas into the profoundly complex, psychologically tortured prince of Elizabethan tragedy.
Precisely.
It's a story that transcends its specific origins because it's so deeply woven into the very fabric of human experience. Themes of betrayal, revenge, madness, justice, the burden of the past, the struggle between action and inaction.
And thinking about this whole process, this amalgamation, raises an important final question, perhaps, for you, our listener. How many other stories, even those we consider purely historical figures or perhaps deeply personal family legends, are actually rich tapestries like Amleth's, woven from countless threads of fact, folklore, borrowed motifs, and evolving language, just waiting for us to unravel their many fascinating layers? It challenges us to look beyond the surface of almost every narrative we encounter, doesn't it? To appreciate the complex, often hidden origins that give these stories their enduring power and resonance. Something to ponder, perhaps, until our next deep dive.
Definitely something to ponder. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the surprising, multi-layered origins of Amleth. We hope you feel a little more well-informed and maybe a lot more curious about the stories that shape